Yes, it's all over but the signing, and by now, maybe it's already the signing.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Welcome into my State of Mind on this Friday evening, this frigid Friday evening. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you aboard. You know, it has been a heck of a week. It's been a heck of a couple of weeks around here. You know, the passing of Buddy Cianci last week, well, 2 weeks ago, and all of the intermediate time up until Monday's funeral. Still surreal, especially if you saw him on a regular basis, as I did at WPRO. And so that's been one of those things that's been hard for, I think, for the community, the state of Rhode Island, certainly the city, his friends, his family, to get their heads around. So that was the beginning of the week, you know, his sign-off, which was beautifully done at the cathedral. And all during this time, we've had the RhodeWorks highway toll program controversy, and it finally came to its end. That headline is not reflective of its end, but it's the one that we had most recently here for our production of tonight's program. And since that headline, which was actually a couple of days ago, the Senate has passed the toll program as well by a vote of 25 to 12. And a little secret that I'll tell you, I'm guessing the governor is going to be signing on Friday here. You can come back to me, Laura, for just a second, and we'll put that back up. Can I just tell you, we've had a couple of days here, and everything doesn't always work the way we want it to. We tape the Friday program on Thursday afternoons, just so you know. And that's why that headline is a little bit behind. And as I speak in real time to the camera, the Senate has just passed on Thursday afternoon the toll program itself. What I'm guessing is that the governor is so excited, she's already tweeting out as I speak on Thursday afternoon, and you're seeing this on Friday, that she's all excited. I'm guessing she's going to rush to a signature. If she doesn't do it, if she hadn't done it today, it'll be done certainly in the next couple of working days. So I remind you of what we're talking about by putting the headline up again. And I'll bring my guest in for the conversation, and he is Justin Katz, the managing editor of the Ocean State Current, who is no stranger to the program. Good to see you again, my friend.
Thanks. Good to be here.
I have to tell you a funny story, though. Justin was one of three people scheduled for our program tonight. State Representative Patricia Morgan and Representative Antonio Giarrusso were scheduled, and due to their dysfunction and inability to project how their day was going to go on Thursday, they are not here. And I say that only with half affection, because we really did plan the program to hear where they think we're going from here. I will say this, though, Pat Morgan has been a heroine, I think, in all of this, and so we're going to give her a little bit of a pass for not being able to figure out that when you make commitments to do a television show, you got to show up. At the same time, Justin and I could go on all night, and usually do, and so you're no consolation prize. But I wanted to get the rep's perspective on what the whole thing has been all about. And before we get into some of the nitty-gritties on that, you tell me, just in broad scope, what do you think this thing has been all about?
Well, obviously the roads need to be fixed, so it's an easy
target. Or the bridges need to be fixed.
Yeah, bridges, roads, infrastructure generally is in very poor condition in Rhode Island. So that needed to be done. It's an easy hit for a politician who wants to make a broader name for herself. My suspicion, by the nature of the structure of the deal, is it's in large part a benefit or something that the governor is trying to give to the laborers union, which supported her, and from which she plucked her new Department of Transportation head. And there's also a debt component, which was supposed to originally going to be a revenue bond based on the tolls, which would have meant higher risk for the investors, higher returns. So there's also the Wall Street angle there. So I think there's a number of things going in to make it the deal that it is currently. Why it's become suddenly so supported throughout the General Assembly, that I haven't quite pieced together. I think a lot of give-me's must have been passed out to get votes.
Yeah, you know, going back to the beginning, when the governor first brought this to us in last May, it was a big stimulus program. It was a $500 million principal borrowing and $1 billion to pay back, and the cash flow was all going to be contain. The tolls, larger in scale than we're getting, higher price and more of them, were projected to be able to fuel the interest and principal payments on a 30-year note for 10 years worth of work.
Yeah.
Even those who supported this thing this week at the General Assembly had to look at that and say, come on, man, we can't afford it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and I'm not so
Although
sure
in some
that's
ways
gone.
it might have been better. In some ways it might have been better, because right now we've got a general fund applicability to all of this, and we've never been very good in Rhode Island in keeping our diligence on what general fund monies are supposed to go for, namely the bridge repair, right?
Well, that's one of our major problems, and it's one of the failures that even the director, Peter Alviti, the new director of the DOT, admits, is that the DOT has been terrible and failing. I think those might have been the words he used testifying before the House Committee the other day, House Committee of Finance, for 40, 50 years. So part of the question now is, well, what's changed that you automatically should be trusted with $500 million of new money? Well, let me say about the revenue and being mixed up in a general fund. I'm still concerned. A lot of people are concerned that this will jump to cars. I'm still concerned that it'll also jump to a revenue bond based on tolls. By the nature of the way the legislation's written, the toll collection is done for no reason that I can tell through the department, the quasi-public Turnpike and Bridge Authority, which has the authority to do revenue bonds because it's a quasi-public. So we could see in a year or two, if revenue just isn't shaping up, that since they're collecting the tolls anyway, which was in the original bill, now they go out for a revenue bond, which does not require voter approval.
Meaning move from what is the revenue anticipation. But see, this is, on a Friday night, if you've got maybe you should have a couple of cocktails. I don't know what camera I'm on. See, it's been that kind of a day, a couple kind of week. Have a couple of cocktails and try to figure this whole thing out. We understand it because we've been watching it closely, but there's a thing called Garvey bond, which is an acronym for revenue anticipation bonds for federal transportation money that we know is coming in.
Right.
You're telling me that looking at the legislation closely, that the actual tolling exercise is being controlled by the Bridge and Turnpike Authority.
Right.
Which never has crossed over with its monies to the general fund.
Right.
So we have an administration inside an authority that's going to collect money that's going to be channeled to a general fund. And you're worried that that will just end up being an exclusive facility for the entire project. And then the borrowing that goes in there is more expensive and more of a money grab in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, well, not only that, it doesn't require voter approval if it becomes a revenue bond. The initial bill last spring was set up in the same way. The Bridge and Turnpike Authority was the one doing the revenue bond that, because they were, it's almost like a shell corporation or whatever the mafia term would be. But in order to collect the tolls and do a revenue bond. That revenue bond based on tolls is gone now. It's a revenue bond based on Garvey through the Commerce Corporation, another quasi-public. There's a lot of shuffling around of these agencies now. But what I'm concerned about is because it's so easy for the Turnpike Authority to do a revenue bond, because you don't need the voter approval, and that's just what they're setting up as a possibility in a year or two, along with
but there's no voter approval even in what they're doing now.
Right. It's a revenue bond through the Commerce Corporation. For some reason, this is why I'm starting to question whether all these quasi-publics are really constitutional, because the General Assembly generally has to ask the people if we want to borrow hundreds of millions.
You've made some points in general that the state of Rhode Island right now is kind of flying by the seat of its pants, making up its own rules. The governor has decided to make up some rules. You know, she's used the University of Rhode Island Foundation for a trip to Sweden that she never went on, but she was going to. She's got the Rhode Island College Foundation that she's using for an innovation officer, even though it's a cabinet position and it's reporting to her. We've got Garvey bonds coming now from a Bridge and Turnpike, tolling authority, which doesn't make any sense. We got all this stuff. All this stuff seems to be fly by the seat of your pants, and good government and constitutional practices may not be damned, but they're certainly not paying any attention to them.
Right. Well, one of the points I've made recently is a lot of people.
It's almost anarchical in a sense.
Well, it's very Wall Street. A lot of people thought Gina Raimondo being in the investment world and having some business savvy would be pro-business, very good for the economy and run government like a business. But there's a difference between being able to make money up here, which is what she's been doing a lot of, and shuffle money around and actually governing. And so I worry that that's a big issue that people should really be paying attention to and kind of understanding where we're headed with this. For example, her entire economic development project is funded through a refinance. So she essentially refinanced in order to borrow another $80 million, again, that we didn't have to approve. There's a lot of tricks going on here, and including the trick with just tolling the trucks, which hasn't been done and is going to be litigated. So it is seat of your pants.
You think your projection? Well, listen, the American Truckers Association is already saying we're gonna sue. They're worried about this becoming wildfire across the country. That this idea of just choosing trucks for revenue purposes, tolling the trucks, will be something that flies. And I think when you see, you know, the Ed Rendells of the world from Pennsylvania writing op-ed pieces to support our governor in her effort, you're starting to see that that track that she has as a national person, a national candidate, a national agenda, is very much driving her motivation and this particular solution. Yes?
Oh, I would say that's become a theme. I mean, we just adopted a report from the Brookings Institution, a Washington, D.C. think tank, as our economic development plan for the state. The national focus on Rhode Island is definitely there. And in fact,
are we a laboratory or a guinea pig?
Well, actually, I was just going to say a few years ago when Bruce Katz visited, when Gina Raimondo was still the treasurer.
Bruce Katz from the Brookings Institution.
Right, I'm sorry, yes.
No relation to you.
No relation, that I know of. But he said, quote, well, I think this is a direct quote, "We love Rhode Island because it's like an experimental, it's like a city-state we can experiment on." It was he said something very similar to that, which ought to shoot off some red flags. And this goes back to also to the fight in the spring over Roadmap Rhode Island, which a lot of people got up in arms again about. You know, it's just, there's this suspicion that we're getting these plans from somewhere, that we didn't generate them here, yet we're going to see if they work and if they make us more, I don't know, feasible as a state for much longer.
Well, listen, there's been some arm twisting going on with this whole thing that Justin may have just kind of tripped into. And when we come back, we'll show the evidence of that. Stay with us.
We did not receive all of the information that we requested.
Representative Morgan, you're out of order. Representative
I know.
Cannavale?
You can keep saying that, but the truth of the matter is I am not, because I am...
7409, substitute A.
I am entitled to the information.
Please.
Yeah, you didn't see her there, but she was fighting like crazy. The State Representative Patricia Morgan, who was scheduled for the program tonight, but due to the hectic nature of the State House, couldn't get over to our broadcast studio. Justin Katz, who was scheduled for the program as well, did, even though he had a flat tire and got over here anyway. We're a little punchy at the end of the week. The shenanigans that went on and that little brawl that Patricia Morgan had, which is more lengthy than what you saw, it's really bad form, don't you think?
Yeah, well, that's one of the interesting things that I'm observing through this session already, especially with this bill. Is things seem to be coming to a head in a way they haven't. I mean, it's anybody who's followed legislation through the process. It's almost stunning when they have a sub-A or a substitute amendment bill that appears, it's completely different or has substantial changes. They slip it in, vote on it, boom, it's done. That's your committee hearing on an amendment. So it's a pretty stunning thing to watch. I'm hoping that these sorts of controversies catch a little bit of attention and people see, well, how can you be out of order if you want to discuss something that was just submitted? Right.
Well, what she was looking for and what she was asking for was all sorts of additional questions to be answered by the DOT director regarding some of the changes that had been made in the legislation. And she proffered that to them, and they still treated her like, you know, like she was some kind of loose cannon gadfly, and you know, all the chairperson had to do, this Ray Gallison, was say, listen, you know what? You've been loyal opposition here. We'll give you 10 minutes, you know, to ask some questions, perhaps rhetorically, make your points, perhaps emphatically, maybe influence the committee, maybe not. But you deserve that respect, Representative. Instead, they shut her down, turn her microphone off, and more or less, you know, turn her into the Wicked Witch of the West. And that's absolutely the kind of manhandling, awful behavior on the part of this General Assembly that has been consistent through the stewardship of Nick Mattiello, the Speaker of the House.
Well, it's actually worse than that. I was at the, not this hearing, but the one where they had a long 8 to 10 hours hearing on the original bill. I was there to testify on a different bill for the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. But the treatment there of Patricia Morgan by DOT Director Alviti was maybe even worse. I mean, just the attitude. And there was one point where she had been trying to nail him down to admit that he wants perpetual tolls on taxpayers. These tolls aren't going away. So she wanted to make that very clear, and he was a little punchy, and she finally laid it out, and he went, "Hello, that's what I've been saying," and you could hear the union labor, especially from laborers who were sitting in the back, you could hear him on the video cackling, which is very union-esque strategy.
And you know,
just the behavior.
And I hope that the governor had something, despite the opposition, clearly there are two sides of the aisle between the governor and Representative Morgan. I know that this governor suffered greatly from the misogynistic disposition of the State House when she was treasurer. I know that she suffered through being, you know, the girl. I know she did. And I would hope that she'd take Director Alviti aside and say, listen, whatever we got to do, we don't do that. Because, you know what, that is misogyny in a House Finance Committee hearing, and your example is the same. And I will tell you, this might be circumstantial and maybe not, or maybe not circumstantial, but maybe coincidental. But we've got a little situation here with another female representative who feels intimidated. You ran into a story here. Narrate for me as we go. Here's Justin's headline in the Ocean State Current, something you should be reading online. Here's the full piece. And here is, well, let me just read this and then you can explain the whole thing. This is actually, well, you tell me, as people are reading this, tell me what this is.
Well, a constituent of Representative Ackerman's, who I've received reliable information from before, forwarded to me this, which was from a long email on her, which I've now posted in full, explaining why she supports tolls, basically, and this whole RhodeWorks program. And so this is the part that kind of shuffled into her paragraphs that I jumped back at, because it says that she's afraid to be the legislator who voted against the bill because she thinks, almost as a matter of course, that DOT will take it out on her district. And not only would they do that, but that she will have failed in not supporting the bill because of this consequence.
She won't be able to deliver the goods to her own constituents.
Right.
In other words, Mendon Road's not going to get fixed.
Right. And
you know, and it's just if it has to be. I have been told by reps and people who know reps that the Speaker has been so bold to list, even in writing, projects that are pending for reps that will not get completed if they don't vote for this bridge repair RhodeWorks program in the manner and in the toll manner that they want to get it done. I mean, look, there's strong arming and then there's political extortion, and I'm not sure where it exists, but I don't know whether to call her a hero or a goat for putting that in writing to a constituent who then outed her and sent it to you, and now it's all over Kingdom Come. Yeah,
well, I would think a hero would come forward and say this is not right. What's key to me is that
she whispered to a constituent. She wouldn't come here and talk about it, now would she?
But not only that she thinks that that's somehow acceptable or inevitable, but that she thinks that a constituent will say, oh, okay, I can understand why. This is how it works. It's unbelievable to me. And including in the latest sub-A that Patricia Morgan was cut off trying to debate is a section that gives the director authority to not do maintenance in certain areas if he can come up with an excuse.
It's just that the strong arming has been incredible. When we come back, we'll talk about the politics going forward and whether you're actually going to say anything about this after the bill is signed. Stay with us.
This plan is equitable, this plan is fair, this plan is good for our economy.
Well, we'll see. And we'll see. This whole program. By the way, can we stipulate again because we need to over and over again. You agree we need to fix the bridges?
Oh yeah, and
I agree we need to fix the bridges. That we're arguing about how to fund fixing the bridges.
yeah, and that's one of the nice things about this particular debate is there are clear options, both from the Republicans and Representative Nunes put in a bill for a public-private partnership to get money up front, which the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity had investigated. These are viable options, at the very least worthy of a look, and hopefully the conversation is going to be about whether people will react to this and bring it to the election and make this matter. But hopefully that fact that there are options will have a role too.
Well, let's talk about what happens in November. Are you one of those people who believe that the public, A, gets this enough to be aggravated about this enough to actually do something enough about it in November with their elected officials?
You know, I'm after whatever 15 years I've been running around Rhode Island politics and policy, I'm very skeptical that people will respond in that way. A lot of times, and sometimes it's even discouragingly surprising, when I talk to people and get them to understand how things are going, the reaction is almost as if it's just too huge to deal with. So, you know, well, hopefully part of the message they receive will be that there are options, there is a reason to change, and it doesn't take that much to vote. And that could send a big signal, at least, that maybe they need to scale back on all these questionable seat-of-the-pants policies.
Well, there's a lot of huffing and puffing going on right now, and I appreciate it. You know, fellow radio hosts, you know, lining up people to run in districts and the like, as if they're new political bosses, and you know, fine. I mean, but I've seen all that huffing and puffing happen, and then 10 days. You know, that group that was going to run all of a sudden found other reasons not to, and all that kind of a thing. I do think, though, that the speaker himself could be in trouble. If a quality candidate came in the district, and the arguments that were made not only about the RhodeWorks program, but the way he's comporting himself and the way the legislature is behaving, that might resonate in his district. I don't know, but the head of the snake might be easier than the whole one.
Well,
I don't know.
Certainly targeted districts, and it doesn't.
That's what the NEA does, right?
And it doesn't take all that much. Well, they also go after legislators that aren't necessarily big players, but just that are vocally opposed to them, and so it doesn't take much to start to make legislators understand that what we've kind of seen in this debate, that there are other options, that there are people who can impose a consequence on them. If they start to understand that, then that could be. And
people in his district like that he's the speaker, I know. But at some juncture, people in his district might be disgusted enough about some of the things that are going on to say, you know what, he's got to go. I don't know.
Well, the statewide, I mean, one of the tragedies of this all is we've got a governor who received not a majority of the votes, but about a third around there, and we've got, just because she can persuade a speaker who received a few thousand votes locally to go along with her plan, suddenly we're borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars. So,
well, then, you know, offering those numbers, if the big, you know, Vox Populi reacts, then maybe there's consequence. But if it goes to sleep,
yeah. Well, it's I can say it's very, very difficult to get people to have a sustained political effort. And I mean, who wants to sit in a 10-hour hearing, except us crazy people?
Well, it takes a couple minutes to vote. Yeah. Good to hear from you, man.
Likewise. Thanks
Oceans Day Current. Read that article. You'll be horrified. We'll wrap up when we come back. Stay with us. We're going to take a night off, and when we come back on Monday night, we're going to revisit a conversation we've had about performance-enhancing substances for young athletes. It's a dangerous situation. It's a program we played recently, and I want you to take a look at it again. Moms, dads, parents, athletes, you should all be paying attention. Then we'll be back live with you on Tuesday. You have a great weekend. Bye-bye.